Committee of the Whole meeting. We have a number of action items before us today, but before we get to those, we are going to get an update, follow-up update on the COVID-19 response, both from our city manager as well as some of our key community partners. So I'm going to turn this over to our city manager. Add a couple things. This is a new process for us virtually. So if you were joining us and watching online, give us a little bit of grace and patience in case there are a few hiccups. But commissioners and others who are tuning in and on with us, when you are not speaking, please make sure that you have your mute on so that there is as little disruption as possible. So with that, I'm going to go to our first item and turn it over to our city manager, Mr. Mark Washington.
Thank you, Mayor. And before I start, Joel, can you, I can't see all the commissioners. Can you either assure that everyone's online or do the roll call of who's present?
Sure. Let's just do that quickly a minute. Mayor Bliss, we know, is Commissioner Lanier. And Commissioner Moody.
Present.
I see Commissioner Moody on. There's Commissioner O'Connor, Commissioner Jones.
Here.
Commissioner Repart.
Here.
Commissioner Isasi.
Present.
Do I got everybody? I think so.
I didn't hear Moody.
He's on.
I'm here.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Good morning, commissioners. I am glad we're able to visit this week again and do it by video conference. As the mayor said earlier, we do have an update, a continued conversation from our last meeting about our COVID response and some of the recovery efforts. I do want to, before I begin, thank again the numerous partners that we have. Foremost, our city staff, who have just been outstanding and tremendous in their efforts and making sure that the public is safe and healthy, but also our partners from all of the medical service providers to the nonprofit agencies, as well as those in the business community that's assisting us with recovery. And you'll hear from a couple of our partners later on today. I will be asking Birgit Close from The Right Place and Rick Baker from the Grand Rapids Chamber to assist in giving an update. But I just want to let the public know that the slides that I will be sharing, as well as additional information, is available on our website under the section regarding COVID updates. So you will have access to all of the materials that we are sharing this morning, as it should now be loaded on the city's website. So I'm going to ask Mr. Kane, if you will, to pull up the slide presentation, please, and share your screen with everyone. Mr. Kane, are you there? City Clerk, can you follow up with him, please?
I turned him off as presenter. Here it comes.
All right, thank you. All right, so again, I want to continue the briefing and the discussion from last week. If you go to the next slide, we continue to partner with Kent County as well as our state and federal partners on what's happening nationally as well as locally. And you can see the impact of COVID-19 across the United States and the fact that there are over 500,000 cases with over 21,000, almost 22,000 deaths. And we are doing our best to ensure that we maintain the appropriate physical distancing, as well as taking other precautions measures among our workforce and the community to prevent the spread of COVID and deaths. If you go to the next slide, you'll see our experience here within the state. This is as of April 14th, that the most recent data that we have showing that there are over 25,000 cases and 1,600 deaths in Michigan. What I appreciate about this graph is showing the number of new cases that are reported daily. And we were excited yesterday to see for the first time in some time that we had the lowest reported number of new cases since the month of April. However, there was a recent spike that we're almost back to 1,000 new cases based on the information that we obtained yesterday. So we were well under 800 yesterday, but almost back to 1,000 new cases. And there are varied reasons. I don't have all the reasons why. Next slide. We do appreciate our partners. Next slide, please. We do appreciate our partners at Kent County for helping to go back, helping to keep us informed about what's happening in our community. And you'll see their most recent, this is a snapshot of their website, which they've amplified to give a little bit more detail about the cases. You'll see within, on the left side of the slide, within Kent County, we have a total of 311 cases and 13 deaths. While we don't know all the particulars around the deaths, we do know that the majority of those deaths, we believe, based on what has been reported out, at least publicly, has been outside of our city. At least 10 of the 13 is our belief at this point. And you'll see the demographics and the breakdown of the experience of the actual cases among the different races and ethnicities as well as gender. So we appreciate them disaggregating this data. I believe many of you asked about that information at our last meeting, and they did respond, and I believe are having more community conversations about creating awareness, particularly where we see that there is a trend among more portions of our community than others. And the question was asked about ethnicity and race, and we do see that among the African American community, although that demographically we are less, that community is less than 20%. The number of people that have been infected is at 20.9%. And you'll also see, again, I mentioned the deaths that we have here in the state, and that's consistent with some of the information I had in the previous slide. Next slide. Next slide, please. Last time we shared with you some of the calls that we had with 311. I just wanted to follow up on, if you look to the right portion of the slide, of the 144 complaints that we had that was made around people being unsafe, not staying at home, whether or not a business should be open or closed, or just unsafe gatherings. We've had 144 of those complaints. Those have been routed through 311. Code compliance has been very helpful in responding, assisting in those response, doing education. And if there's not resolution or compliance to code compliance, the police department has gotten involved. To my knowledge, so far, the last occurrence or last discussion I had with the police chief was that there have been no arrests that have been made by the police department to date because of these specific complaints. While there have been incidents in which the police department has been dispatched, I am not aware of any cases in which there have been arrests. Next slide. We have, next slide, please. We have started our homeless outreach team. The acronym is HOT. I believe I gave an update on that last time. I appreciate the police and fire department for going forward and identifying a need and just doing it. The old Nike adage. We had previously talked about resourcing these departments with additional staff in our fiscal year 21 budget, but the give credit to police chief and fire chief for repurposing or redeploying staff to do that very outreach effort now. And there is a team of one police officer and firefighter that has been proactively interacting with our shelters, our homeless community, doing education, creating more awareness. If they see gatherings that are unsafe, educating, talking to those that are a part of that, as well as referring. And that has been effective. There are people who are aware of where the need is the most, but they also are complaint oriented. And so if we get these complaints to 311, they are part of the response team in addition to code compliance if need be. Next slide. So at this time, I'm going to shift from talking about response and speak more of our recovery efforts. We gave you a very detailed briefing last time around what we were doing internally, as well as what some of the resources were external to the city, as well as nonprofits and community organizations and businesses, separate efforts within the city. And I'd like to just remind you, next slide, of the coalition of community members, and I will not go over all of them by name, and there may be some that are participating that are not listed, but this gives you an idea of the breadth of collaboration that's happening around the city. We appreciate the Chamber of the Right Place Experience Grand Rapids for forming a coalition of community members to help us to provide information on the new website, wm.org, to assist businesses on information either for individual assistance, for unemployment, or small business assistance, loans, grants, etc. It has been a good resource that we have likewise referred in our communications in terms of what assistance is available for relief, recovery, and revitalization. Next slide. So we'll have an item on the agenda we'll talk about later, the very item around approving some of the emergency assistance around federal funding. We have been awarded a $2.2 million community development block grant specifically for COVID, as well as a 1.1 emergency solutions grant for COVID response. The ESG grant can be used for homelessness and housing, while we have a little bit more flexibility around the CDBG funding that we might be able to assist in business recovery into low income or targeted areas. We've also began forming our business assistant team internally, as well as communicating with our corridor improvement authorities and other partners to talk about what can we do commonly as a community and how we can bring our resources together to make sure we're not duplicating services and making the most out of the resources that we have in our community. We've also are contemplating what resources we can either reallocate or repurpose or identify in the preliminary fiscal plan, which will be proposed to you on April 28th. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to ask if Mr. Rick Baker and Ms. Berger Close will turn on their camera and mic, and I will turn the balance of the presentation over to them. Mr. Baker, are you on the line?
Thank you, City Manager Washington. Is my mic and my camera on?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Well, and Mayor Bliss and Commissioners, on behalf of my friend and colleague Birgit Close and I, thank you for allowing us to be here to give you a brief update of what's been going on. There's a lot of, as Mark mentioned, a lot of efforts in our community to serve the region. I don't know where that feedback is coming from, or if everybody's hearing it, or if it's just me, but we're going to talk to you a little bit today.
Everyone mute your phones, please. I mean, your cameras.
So we are going to talk to you today specifically about the work that we're doing in the business community, serve the business community. And as City Manager Washington mentioned previously, that is very much of a true West Michigan spirit response. We have a number of organizations in the region that are supporting the work. Some of us, we're all still doing our own work, but we're doing it collectively and then oftentimes in partnership with one another, make sure that we're serving everyone in our community. And so on the slide you have in front of you is just a sampling of some of the organizations that are engaged in the work in this region, the Grand Rapids Chamber and the Right Place, of course, as well as our colleagues in the West Michigan Hispanic Chamber, ESO, the Entrepreneurial Support Organizations, Grand Rapids Inc., and of course the City of Grand Rapids.
Mr. Baker, before you go further, someone is either driving or outside and there's a lot of wind noise. Please mute your mic, please.
Thanks, Rick, and thanks, Manager Washington and the City Commission for the opportunity this morning to speak to you. As Rick mentioned, we started this collective response over a month ago now, actually before some of the executive orders came down. We meet on a regular basis, just like this, weekly, to exchange information, stay connected, and have a common response to our various business communities to keep them engaged, involved, and also, more importantly, informed, because there's so much information coming at them and at us that we want to be sure that we are all speaking with a common voice and they don't get lost in between all of the different things that are going on. So, and I really appreciate my colleagues. This is a very West Michigan response, and it's deeply appreciated. Next slide. So as you know and have experienced, I see, and I'm sure you do too, we see employee layoff notices coming through the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity every day. Obviously, our companies are experiencing revenue losses. We've seen business closures, particularly in our downtown area, in retail, in restaurants, in the hotel business. We are trying to keep up with all the executive orders and the compliance that comes with that. And of course, there's been a very deep impact on our hospitality and tourism. As I'm looking outside out of my office, it looks very sad, actually. But I think we also are, as the regional community leaders, coming up with thoughts and ideas and processes to ameliorate some of what you're seeing. Next slide. I'm sorry, Rick, impact on your members, I'm sure, is as steep as it is on the manufacturing community.
Yeah, particularly the small business community is really challenging for the small business community, and being able to respond quickly to provide access to information and the resources that are out there and available. The biggest concern that we've heard is chaos and confusion. Every time there's an executive order, there's something new, people getting their head around what is it, how do I comply? And then, of course, cash flow for businesses, the cash flow is a big challenge as well, particularly in the small business communities.
So that's really why we started this coordinated business outreach. The larger companies have an easier time, but even they are calling us to find out what an executive order really means, et cetera. Rick already mentioned this, and Mr. Washington did as well. One of the first actions that we took as these collaborative was to ask our marketing folks to get together and look at how we can create a website that has all of this detailed information on it, and not just disparate information where particular small businesses can go. And so we created covidwm.org. And there's another one, lovelocalgr.com. They're being updated regularly. The website was supported by Experience Grand Rapids, and my team, my marketing team, Andrea and Lena, actually put the website together, and we are keeping it up as well collectively. And we're trying very hard to keep all of the things in order so that it's updated on a regular basis, and that our small business in particular know where to go. And there's just a couple of sources where you click and you get everything. If I can move on to the big yellow box in the corner. No, please stay on this slide. Thank you. So I'm sure many of you have heard that the Michigan Economic Development Corporation made available to the entire state of Michigan a $10 million grant program. That $10 million grant was distributed through 10 regions. In our region, the recipient of the grant was the right place, and we received $1 million for 11 counties. Let me underline, $1 million for 11 counties. The MEDC then prescribed how much money would be allocated to each county based on demographics, i.e. number of inhabitants. So of course, Kent County has received the largest share of $675,000, and the other $225,000 are being distributed amongst the other 10 smaller rural counties. We have received over 2,400 applications for $1 million. Let me repeat, we have received over 2,400 applications for $1 million. We received 2,200 applications in Kent County alone for $675,000. The total ask out of the 11 counties was over $10 million. Mind you, these are all small businesses, local restaurant, a barber shop, a beauty shop, a motorcycle repair shop, all small businesses that were affected first by the order. So we're in the process of the right place is the holder of the funds. We will be the pass-through of the funds. We created a review committee in each county. And in Kent County, the review committee includes Dante Villarreal from the chamber. He's chairing the committee. We have someone from my staff. We have Richard App. We have Jamil Robinson. We have the Hispanic Chamber. We have Start Garden, Daryl Ross. We have Local First, Hannah Schulze, who are going to look over 1,200 applications that are eligible and then have to make the very difficult decision on who gets $675,000. The maximum amount of the grant is $10,000. So grant review process has started. It's the Right Place staff that has to unfortunately tell about 1,000 applicants that they did not qualify. Not an easy thing to do. I'm sorry I'm spending so much time on this because it's really important. It demonstrates the need when you have over $10 million for 11 counties, and probably more than half of that came out of Kent County alone. So we're working very hard with the committee to make right and good decisions, but $675,000 sounds like a lot of money, but obviously their need is much, much greater. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rick to talk about their fund. Obviously, we also can answer questions after the presentation.
Sure. Thanks, Birgit. So as you heard from Birgit, there's a lot of need. And I mentioned cash flow as one of the biggest concerns for particularly small businesses. And so with the leadership and support from the Grand Rapids business community, through our Grand Rapids Chamber Foundation, we set up a local private fund as well. And we're looking for additional support for that because the need is much greater than the resources that we have available. That we have a online application platform that will be going live later this week. But we have tested the fund with a few of our businesses that are involved in some of our minority business programming at the Grand Rapids Chamber to make sure our internal processes are set up and our review processes are good to go before we launched it publicly. Because as Birgit just mentioned, we anticipate way more applications or interest than we will have the resources to provide. That's why I think the coordination is so important, so that we can take the various funds that are available, whether it be state funds, city funds, or private funds through the Grand Rapids Chamber Foundation. The coordination is so important so that we're able to serve as many businesses as possible and to get them where we need them to be able to sustain this challenging time. Just want to touch base before we go to the next slide, just on the coordinated business outreach as well. And what Birgit and I both know from our years in working with the business community, it is important for us to reach out to them, not for them to reach out to us. Because sometimes by the time they reach out to us, it's too late for us to be as much help as we could be. And so it's important for us to do that outreach. And so both of our teams have been very intentional in making outreach to hundreds and hundreds of businesses in our region to connect with them, to make sure that they're aware of the resources, that they're aware that we're here to help them, and to connect them to the resources that are available in our region.
Just to echo what Rick just said, while we cannot go visit a manufacturing company in person, we can do what we're doing now. And so our retention work has actually increased, not decreased. And we actively outreach to those companies to see how we can help, what information they need. And this is particularly true of our smaller manufacturers who may not have the staffing to keep track of all of the things that are coming at them. And so it's very important that retention is really continues to be our hallmark during this time and obviously also going forward. So next slide.
Just a couple of things besides the financial support, of course, the technical assistance and the webinars. Again, as I mentioned, a lot of the every time there's a decision made on a policy at the state or federal level, the business community's first reactions, well, how do I comply? How do I work within this new reality? And so our team stood up, and a lot of other organizations in the community stood up webinars immediately to provide information to the small business community. We're doing that in English and in Spanish so that we can reach a large section of our community. We're also providing, between our two organizations, technical assistance to individual companies, wraparound services, if you will, to help them manage cash flow and to understand some of the challenges and how to be successful. And then the partnership we have with the city and downtown Grand Rapids, Inc. on the retail retention and attraction specialist that's early in its relationship. We've had to pivot very quickly. And we have Richard App connecting with all the neighborhood business associations connects with them daily, actually, individual businesses within those neighborhoods to make sure that they're getting what they need to be successful to weather this storm. And, as we mentioned before, this is a collective process, and the two of us, are pleased to be able to be here to represent a number of organizations that are engaged in this work throughout the community and serving on multiple task forces and collections of our partnerships to serve the business community.
And there are also a couple of task forces that are at the state level from some senators that we are staying closely connected with. There is a task force that I'm also a part of at the state level. And they're concerned now with what follows after the crisis. And so Andy Johnston from the Chamber's been doing a great job in keeping us all informed of what's happening in Lansing so that we can also bring that back to the task forces locally. And I want to thank the mayor and Manager Washington for standing up a local task force on what follows after, how do we come out of this? So while we are still dealing with the crisis, we're also all starting to pivot to make sure that when we get the go ahead on how do we open, what is our work look like then? So next slide, please. So on the talent needs assistant, I think many of you know Cindy Brown. She was the executive director of Hello West Michigan. She's now the vice president of talent at The Right Place. And Cindy and Rachel Gray from Hello West Michigan are on the phone in meetings like this with HR folks, with other organizations that are engaged in talent, with Talent 2025, with West Michigan Works on a daily basis. There are still companies that are hiring, and we want to make sure that those folks who are without work now get connected in the right way and efficiently to the companies that are hiring. I will give you an example. I had an outreach to me last Saturday from a Grand Rapids company, manufacturer, that will now be making the big shields for our frontline healthcare workers. And he emailed me on Saturday and said, I need 100 additional workers. And I emailed Cindy immediately, and 30 minutes later, he had 3 organizations that can help him find that workforce. So Cindy is making all of the talent connections along with Jacob Maas and the other talent organizations in the area to make sure that people get connected to the resources they need and the jobs that are still open. Another example, both Meijer and Spartan Foods have been hiring. I know Spartan added almost 2,000 employees. I don't know the numbers from Meijer. But we are working very closely with all of them to make sure everybody is plugged in. On the COVID-19 procurement, I would say this is where the Right Place team has done the most work. We have identified over 1,300 business connections that we've made very early on. We created a task force with Michigan State University, Dr. Beauchamp, for our hospitals, and that included Pine Rest and Mary Free Bed, and a number of manufacturers and logistics providers to see about procurement coordination. I think everybody knows, everybody was looking for sanitizer, N95 masks, you name it, the shields. So we found companies that are now making these products locally. We found new supply chain providers to find the masks. We helped the city of Grand Rapids with PPE, personal protection equipment. For your frontline folks, we are helping the sheriff's department do the same. There are now several companies making hand sanitizer here. They're often donating that sanitizer. We have now 3 or 4 companies making the shields. So we have developed a supply chain that I believe will serve us really well and serve those companies well and our hospitals once we are through this and we can make some of these really important things locally. What we're now getting are the smaller hospitals, senior living facilities who also need some of these things. And again, we're collaborating with Michigan State. We have an additional staff member from them who's aggregating all of the needs from the smaller healthcare providers who just don't have some of the resources in their organizations to find these things. So give you another example. We had a request from the county last Saturday afternoon for 300 styrofoam containers, like think picnic boxes, in which to transport specimen. I reached out to David Van Andel at the Van Andel Institute because I knew that I had seen them use these. And on Saturday afternoon at 3:30, they donated those 300 styrofoam boxes to the county to transport specimen for testing. So this community has stood up unbelievably in this space. There is a company now that's making parts for ventilators. They just submitted the first test products. So it's been a truly West Michigan effort to find suppliers, for people to stand up and say, I can do this, and are making products for our hospitals and other frontline folks.
You know what, I add one thing about the legislative updates. I would tell you that our focus now is changed to what's next. How do we get the economy up and going again? Making sure that the West Michigan voice is in this conversation, and making sure that we're thinking about not just essential businesses, but how can companies operate in a safe manner? Our companies don't want to put their employees or their customers at risk. They're used to operating in a safe manner, and so give us the parameters. Let us get back to work and get the economy going again. And so that is our focus, is shifted from reacting and providing information to what is being handed to us to now trying to influence, like, let's get the economy restarted and get back to work. Next slide, please.
Rick, do you want to talk about the DGRI fund?
Oh, yes, we're really pleased that DGRI has also stepped into the game as well and made available resources and coordinating with the group, with all of us, because as we've mentioned previously, there are limited resources. The demand is much higher than the resources we have available. And so we appreciate DGRI joining that effort, and will be coordinating with us so that, again, we can serve as many businesses as possible. I believe the conversations with Tim are to continue, possibly use the same platform, and those companies that are located downtown, direct them to that fund, so that we can make our resources go as far as possible.
So everybody obviously has heard about the huge stimulus package that came out of the federal government. Of particular interest, of course, are the 2 SBA programs. The money while there is a lot of money in there, the funds, Dante is on this call, I believe, as well, have almost all been expended. We worked very closely on the payroll protection program, as did the chamber with our local companies. I know the chamber did with their members, and everybody else in the coalition with their constituents. Our local banks stood up, but most of them have now nationally shut down the application process because the money is pretty much gone. As with our small grant, this program was really, really, really overrun, basically, with requests. And on the SBA Economic Injury Relief Program, originally it was set up to be $2 million in loans and for working capital, but I think the grants have now shrunk considerably to make the money last longer. But like I said, both of these funds are pretty much out of funds. And there is discussion in Washington for another $250 billion, I believe, but it is stuck in negotiations. So again, a very large chunk of money, $350 billion, that was pretty much committed in a very, very short period of time. I think most of the banks opened their windows a week ago Friday, some a week ago, as late as a week ago today, and the money went really, really fast. So we have to, again, tell our companies that it's basically too late, wait for the next tranche. So, Rick?
Yeah, I would echo that. We're hearing from the business and the banks that, I mean, it's just overwhelmed with the need. Much like our own local funds, the need is much greater than the funds that are available. And the time that it takes to get through the process, which is why we set up the local funds to kind of create that bridge for those companies who might be able to access federal money, create a bridge so that they can have the cash flow they need until those resources come in. I think our final slide. Again, we're pleased. I want to thank Jim Kelly and his board for the $1 million they're putting in the next year's budget, because that's going to be important, because this isn't all going to be done, here in May or June even. It's going to be something that lingers into the next several months. So having resources in the pipeline, we applaud the city of Grand Rapids and the work that you're doing to help the Grand Rapids business community get back up on its feet and get back to work. We've mentioned the unified application and the coordinated effort, which I think is important to make sure that we're serving as many as possible. And then we continue to do outreach. If you're connecting with a business that we've not been able to connect with, please send them our direction to either one of our organizations, and we'll make sure that they're getting the assistance that they needed.
Yeah, just on the unified application, I think that's a really big piece, because particularly smaller companies are not all really need technical assistance to make sure the application is filled out properly. And so as we're going at Right Place, going through our application process, we're also making sure that they then get passed on properly to Rick, Dante, and their team, and then DGRI, so that those folks who are applying but may not qualify for one, but may for another, don't have to go and start all over again to fill out paperwork, right? They don't have time, and they shouldn't have to. So to have a process that is continuous and seamless to us is really, really important. As Rick said, we are now looking forward to post-crisis. What do? We will continue at Right Place to do the work that we've always done, which is retaining first, and making sure that the companies that are still operating or that need to go back into operation have the resources that they need, either from the local level or the MEDC or wherever we can find it, to get them back to work as quickly as possible.
Can anyone hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, Birgit, I think we lost connectivity towards the end, but I think people heard most of the comments. So let's see, is Mayor, are you on now? We can't hear you if you're on.
Yep, can you hear me now?
Yep. Okay. So we'll turn it over to you to facilitate any questions the commission might have.
All right, am I off mute now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. Sorry we lost connection momentarily. So let me open it up for questions. Commissioners, let's see. How can I tell if you have a question? I still have the slides up, so I can't see everybody's face.
Take the slide off, Asante, please.
There you go.
Maybe if I can see everybody. Well, I will start by adding my thanks to both Birgit and Rick, but all of our partners in this space. Everybody has come together immediately and pulled together, identified what we can do to work together, but also how do we make sure moving forward that we're not duplicating efforts, but we truly are working in a genuine public-private partnership way to do everything we can to support our business community. So I just want to say thank you both for your leadership, along with all of our other partners who've been working so closely with us. I still have the slides up and I can't see anyone.
Mayor, they're down on the screen. So I'll tell you, get your eyes, I'll be your eyes. So is there anybody else that has questions from the commission?
This is Sunita. I'd just like to echo the same sentiments as the mayor, thanking Birgit and Rick for the presentation and sharing some of those stories about coming together of our community in a time like this. Thanks for the website. It has been extremely helpful to send businesses to because, as you've mentioned, there was a lot of information being shared, and I think well-meaning people were sharing the information that was being shared, and so it was overwhelming a lot of businesses. And to have just a website to say, go here, and in our last briefing last week, the 311 talked about, sending people there as a stop as well if people wanted to make phone calls. So just streamlining this has been, I believe, really valuable for the business community. Thank you for the presentation. It was very
No, thank you, Commissioner.
And by the way, I'll just add, I didn't have any tech difficulties, Mayor and City Manager. On my end, I heard the entire presentation and it didn't break up on my end. Just wanted to mention that. So I don't know if it was everybody or not, but I didn't have any challenge.
This is Joel. I think for those that are in City Hall, we had a little glitch with the City Hall internet, as we are all 6 feet apart from each other or more.
Okay, I see.
Okay.
Mayor, Commissioner Isasi had her hand at some point. I'll be the eyes for City Manager, who is being the eyes for you as he's going back to his office.
Thank you. I'll to add my echo of thanks in my day job working with 21 different businesses. And I think that last part, Commissioner, just information overload while you're worried about, what's happening in your own families and lives, but also the employees, and then just trying to wade through all of this. So thank you. I did have a question. I know, Birgit, you talked about obviously the $1 million grant program and for that update. Will this information, after this is said and done, will we see information, much like we talked about the county health information, disaggregated as it relates to parts of Kent County, race and ethnicity, size of business?
I will ask, is Tim on the line?
Yes, yeah, I'm here.
Is that a question you can answer?
Yeah, absolutely. Good, Commissioner Ceci. So couple of things. Yes, we will report out on what businesses received grants, how much those grants were for. And we are able to collect some information. Unfortunately, the intake form that we were provided from the MEDC was provided to us from the MEDC, and we had to use that form as it was written. In that form, there were no questions regarding demographic, ethnicity, or anything like that. So, while we can't report out on that, then we will report out the number of businesses that were awarded. We are recording at least a zip code at this point, type of business, name of business, and we'll be able to report that out.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you. I just had one other thing that I wanted to mention, Mayor. Actually, two things. You all talked about companies that are hiring, and we know that that is actively happening. I do want to mention the virtual hiring event that West Michigan Works is having on April 21st and 23rd. I think, these conversations are both and how do we ensure the livelihood of our local business and economy, and also recognizing the people that live in our city oftentimes are working at those businesses. And so for job seekers, I think they have until the end of this week. Right now, I think it's about 30 plus employers that are engaging. So I wanted to mention that event to those who may be watching. And then just another thought about, we talked quite a bit about the wraparound services. Rick, you talked about that, sort of the high touch, making sure that people are not, you're not waiting for them to reach out. And I think that's a really good point. I would love to see how we could identify some of those best practices for business as we think about some other funding that's in front of us. Mainly we'll be talking about CDBG, wraparound services for people, for individuals, residents. This is not a plug for my organization, but there are a lot of organizations who do that wraparound support for individuals. And so what are those best practices out of business community to residents? Thank you.
Great.
And I think there's an opportunity we'd be happy to coordinate continue to coordinate with the city as the city's work comes online to make sure that those wraparound services are for the business community that are happening for them.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I can't unmute. Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Fine, Mayor.
All right, thank you. I'm like, it isn't showing up on my thing. It says I'm still muted. So, Commissioner Isasi, thank you for bringing that up. And I know that you're working fast and furious at the source as well to help with this work. So thank you for that. Commissioners, any final questions for our guests who have joined us today? All right, I want to thank Tim Kelly for joining us as well and for the work of DGRI. I'm really proud of the DDA board at our last meeting, as we've talked about allocating funds, not just for the response, but for the recovery efforts. So thank you, Tim, for that. Okay, with that, I think we're gonna say thank you one more time to everyone who joined us from our partner agencies. Of course, you're welcome to stay on for our meeting, or we respect that you have a lot of work to do, and you're welcome to sign off as well.
And we want to thank the city, the commission. This is truly a partnership. And I think during the toughest of times is when we show how we can work together. And that makes us a pretty unique community. So thank you very much. Deeply appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rick. Okay, City Manager, any final thoughts before I move on with the agenda?
No, Mayor, thanks again for giving us the opportunity to update the commission.
All right, thank you.
Thank you to our partners.
All right, Commissioners, we'll turn to our action items then. First on our agenda is a resolution approving the request from Spaciation Artisan Ales LLC for an on-premise tasting room license to be located at 928 Wealthy Street Southeast. Can I get a motion?
Moved. Support.
All right, moved and supported by Commissioner O'Connor and then Commissioner Moody. Our city clerk, do you want to tell us about?
Yep. So for all these next four items, all of them have been fully vetted by all the necessary departments. So they're all set to go.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, any questions? All right, I will turn to our city clerk for the vote.
Commissioner Lanier.
Aye.
Commissioner Jones.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Asasi, Commissioner Isasi,
Yes.
and Mayor Bliss.
Yes, it carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution approving the request from CJ Sisters LLC for a redevelopment district liquor license to be located at 40 Pearl Street.
Moved.
Support.
Okay, moved and supported by Commissioner O'Connor and then Commissioner Asasi. City Clerk, anything to add to this?
Nope.
All right, then you can go ahead and do a vote.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Asasi,
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier,
Aye.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes. All right, next that will take us to a resolution approving the request from GR Noir LLC for a redevelopment district liquor license to be located at 35 Division Avenue Southeast. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved by Commissioner Jones, supported by Commissioner Asasi. City Clerk, anything to add to this?
Nope.
Okay, Commissioners, any questions or comments? All right, we'll have the City Clerk.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Asasi,
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier,
Aye.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes, sir.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes, it carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution approving the request from Bold Cigars LLC for a redevelopment district liquor license to be located at 144 Fulton Street East.
Moved. Support.
Do I have a support?
Support. Support. Support.
Connor and supported by Commissioner Jones. City Clerk, anything to add on this?
Nope.
All right, any questions, Commissioners? All right, we'll go ahead and
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Asasi,
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier,
Aye.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
yes. All right, Commissioners, next that will take us to our sixth item, and this is recommendations of the Downtown Improvement District Board and a resolution to set a public hearing for May 12th on the necessity for special assessment rule 8748.
So
Can I get a-
moved.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. So we have Mr. Tim Kelly here with us today, and I'll let him kind of give us a briefing on this.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Thank you. I see that's nodding. I am going to walk through this item relatively quickly. I did have a quick presentation I was going to give if I'm able to share my screen.
Yep, I will do that for you. Hold on.
Okay, thank you. And while that's happening, I'll just echo a lot of the statements on the COVID-19 response conversation. I think the
You're all
partnership
set, Tim.
with the community is pretty fantastic. So let me try to share this. Did everyone see that?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So as the mayor outlined, this item before you is a submittal of the Downtown Improvement District report and a request to approve the resolution establishing May 12th as the date for a public hearing of necessity to continue our Downtown Improvement District for fiscal year 21. The current 5-year authorization expires on June 30th. And so we are requesting to set a public hearing and ultimately your approval in later in June to continue the DID and the important services it provides. Included in your packet was a cover memo, report, and a draft presentation, which hopefully gave you an overview of recommendations for the reauthorization. But the main point I want to convey to you this morning is that given the situation we're in with the coronavirus, our reauthorization committee and our DID board made the recommendation to not make any adjustments to the DID rate, boundary, or services. Instead, what they have recommended and what we'll hope that you'll approve later in June is a 1-year extension of the existing rates and services for fiscal year 21. That said, I did want to give you a quick overview of what the DID is, a quick reminder on that and how we got here. After that, I'd be happy to take any questions. So a reminder that our DID is an improvement district that is funded via voluntary special assessments on real property. It was established back in 2000, governed by state law, PA 120. And it can only be used for enhanced services above and beyond what the city already provides. And so DGRI since 2013 has helped administer that the improvement district, and it's also managed by a 15-member mayoral appointed board. And primarily, the tool today is being used to fund our clean and safe services in downtown via our ambassador program and Block by Block. It also is become important in helping to assist marketing and promoting downtown businesses. And so, as we all know, the neighborhood has grown pretty dramatically in the past couple of years, both through development and annual visitors, but also in the infrastructure that has come online and that needs to be maintained and upkept each day. And so a couple data points to share. Since 2018, we've, through our ambassadors, have removed 500,000 pounds of trash. We have doubled the amount of trash cans from 90 up to 180. Over 1 million cigarette butts have been recycled via our cigarette recycling program. And we've also more than doubled the planting locations that need to get maintained each year. So up from 125, we currently have 286 planting locations that are managed and maintained. And that's in addition to all the public spaces that are starting to get more active. Van Andel Arena Alley, Dog Park down on Market Avenue, Rosa Parks, as well as Calder Plaza and many others. And so recognizing that our authorization was coming to an end, back in November, we launched into, we initiated the process to do the reauthorization. And part of that included examining the existing services, surveying stakeholders on what they thought can be improved, and then having a one-on-one outreach with the existing ratepayers. And that process was overseen by both a steering committee, 6-member steering committee of current board members, as well as ratepayers. We also had a lot of interaction with our DID board throughout this process. And so following conversations, outreach via the survey, we kind of landed on and identified 3 important priorities for the coming authorization, which was to prioritize partnerships with behavioral health and social service agencies, and to expand services to the homeless community, increase business and restaurant marketing. That was one of the #1 things that we heard was going to be needed. And then also importantly, to increase the ambassador wages to help with retention and to attract high caliber ambassadors. The entry-level starting wage for an ambassador is currently $11. And so there was agreement among the board that we would look to bump that up to 13 as a way to provide better wages for those important workers. And then, as I think we all know, the world changed quickly. And so at our committee meeting on March 12th, there was broad agreement that given the current circumstances, it would be difficult to look at any sort of rate increases for the coming year. And that was reaffirmed at our March 23rd board meeting. And so, as I mentioned at the outset, no changes are proposed for the coming fiscal year. However, there was also a lot of discussion about how vital these services are currently today, as our clean team and ambassadors are out on the streets, cleaning the sidewalks, sanitizing infrastructure in some of those high touch areas. But also as we begin to think about our recovery, we want to make sure that people feel safe and welcome. And that's one of the things that the ambassadors help with, is providing that friendly face. But also as they continue to be out cleaning, emptying trash cans, we hope that gives people the assurances that the environment is safe to be in once we get the all clear from the executive orders. So the last slide is just talking about next steps. So as a reminder, the request for you today is to set a public hearing on May 12th. With your approval, we would begin the mailing of notices on the hearing of necessity. We would look for your consideration on that resolution in June. And then following that, notices would get mailed out and billing would occur sort of in the normal schedule. Those dates I have noted there are tentative, as they are subject to change as we work with the assessor. 3 last points I did want to make, and then I'm happy to take some more questions, is that Depending on the availability of our fund balance, we could look at some of the priorities that were identified during our conversations and stakeholder outreach in FY21. In particular, there was a lot of agreement that we should look to do a wage increase as quickly as possible. That was one of the top priorities that we identified. And so assuming we're able to come back online here in the next weeks and months, we do think we'd be able to accomplish that in fiscal year 21 and carry it forward in another reauthorization. Also, the behavioral health support emerged as a top priority. And so if there was additional funding available, we could look to initiate some interactions there. Importantly, our DID board did approve some funding for the Public Inebriate Center for fiscal year 20. And so there was conversations around if the fund balance remains, and we could also look to support that and some of the other partnerships that are going on in that behavioral health space. The second point I wanted to make as I finish up here is that I mentioned the DID is for enhanced services. We've been working really closely with partners at the city, particularly James Hurt and his team, to identify the base level of service that the city provides in downtown to help clarify roles and responsibilities for all this new infrastructure I mentioned. The downtown is very different than it was back in 2000. And so we just want to be clear on who's responsible for what. James and his team have helped us to kind of identify what they're doing. And in the appendix of the draft plan that was in your packet, there's an outline of an MOU that we expect to bring back to you later this spring for approval. And then lastly, just wanted to say that assuming the timeline for coming back online and the recovery begins in the next weeks and months, we would be back before you this time next year with what we would consider the more advancing the recommendations from the conversations that we had prior to this year, and likely in a 3-year term, as that was what the board was looking to recommend before all this happened. So with that, I am happy to take any questions and go from there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Tim. All right, commissioners, any questions for Mr. Kelly? All right, so what's before us? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I have a question. And thanks for the presentation. I'm curious to know what's the status of the businesses that would be impacted? Are many of them closed now? And do you anticipate, hearing some challenges with being able to meet the financial obligations of the assessment? I think it's a great gesture that you all decided not to make an increase, but I'm just curious to know about existing businesses and how they're faring right now during this crisis. Are many of them closed?
Ms. Kelly, before you answer that, Joel, can you take back over? There you go. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Lanier. That's a great question and one that we've been thinking a lot about. We are closely monitoring the business activity in downtown. Obviously, most are closed currently. The hope is that through some of the programs that are in place at the federal, state, and local level, that they will be able to come back online. I think what we have been watching is the timing for all this to occur. As I kind of outlined in that last slide there, we're looking for the public hearing later in May. The commission consideration would be in June, and then the billing would occur after that. And so I think all of those milestones give us the ability to adapt should we need to. But we wanted to initiate the process so that we had the opportunity, and given the expectation that we will be back online and into a recovery phase, we wanted to at least initiate that, but we will continue to monitor the situation on the ground.
Great, thank you.
All right, any other questions, commissioners?
Mayor, if there are no other commissioner questions, I do have a couple comments.
Okay, sure, city manager.
So first of all, again, I want to thank Mr. Kelly and the DDA and DGR for their partnership. I also, while there are many people who are served, I want to thank specifically Ms. Jenna Wallace for her technical support that she provides on the financial side and her help in all of the accounting. And I do want to also acknowledge the role of the ambassadors and their helpful role in maintaining the public health. Earlier on, people were actually there was not a lot of public understanding or awareness. They were actually complaining about that service, but as you have seen in the slides, they are performing a critical service of maintaining health, hygiene in public spaces, as well as sanitary, make sure that there are sanitized conditions and empty and trash. So I want to thank them for that. And also, I don't want to lose too far. I don't want it to be too far off the radar of some of the major projects that we had in economic expansion can also be helpful in revitalization. So even the conversation around the River for All, although we are some ways from launching, but those are still projects, infrastructure projects that could be helpful in a restart of our economy at some point, particularly long-term efforts. So again, my thanks to everyone involved.
Thank you, City Manager. Okay, so I think I'll turn to our city clerk for
Yep, so Commissioner Moody. Commissioner Sassi. Commissioner Lanier. Commissioner Jones.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor.
Yes.
Commissioner Repart.
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
yes. All right, that'll take us to our next item, and that is a resolution to consider a zoning ordinance text amendment to create a special condition overlay district intended to implement changes recommended by area-specific plans. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved and supported by Commissioner Moody and then Commissioner Lanier. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Turkelson to tell us about this item.
Good morning, Commission. Can everybody hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay, the proposed zoning amendment does implement the recommendations of the Southtown Area Specific Plan, commonly known as the Southtown BASP. The new amendment does consolidate other unique requirements of the zoning ordinance that have resulted from past area specific plans. But just know that that's really a relocation of where those requirements are zoning ordinance into Article 8. There is no change to the actual requirement itself. So the only actual change that we have from current policy or current ordinance is Part E of the proposed amendment you have in front of you, which is titled Southtown Business Area Specific Plan - Industrial Flex Area. The amendment does implement the industrial flex recommendation of the BASP. Recall those parcels that were shown in blue for the plan, the future land use plan of the ASP itself. And those parcels are currently zoned industrial transportation or IT. As it's currently written, the underlying zoning would not change. It would continue to be IT, but the use table of the transitional city center or the TCC would be overlaid or allowed as an additional option in addition to the uses permitted in the IT zone district. The exception to this is that residential would not be permitted as it currently is not allowed. And it would also limit building heights to 3 stories. And those are very specific components of the BASP recommendation for the industrial flex. Given the engagement work that was completed with the development of the BASP and the narrow but literal interpretation or implementation, of the industrial flex recommendation, we did not recommend that a public hearing was necessary as part of this, but know that we will also continue working with the Southtown Corridor Improvement Authority to implement other aspects of the plan, other recommendations of the plan. So there will be some additional changes to the zoning ordinance coming in the future, but this one was important for us to move forward quickly. And that is all I have. If there's any questions, I'm happy to help.
Okay, great. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Turkelson? All right, I feel like we've talked about this multiple times now, so it's forward. Seeing no questions or comments, I'll turn to our city clerk for the vote.
Commissioner Isasi. Commissioner Lanier. Commissioner Jones.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor.
Yes.
Commissioner Repart.
Yes.
Commissioner Moody.
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes, it carries. All right, Commissioners, next I will need a motion to suspend the rules to take up this final item. Can I get a motion? Suspend the rules. City Clerk, will you call for the suspend the rules motion?
Yes. Commissioner Lanier.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, sorry. Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi,
Yes.
Mayor
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes. All right, so the motion or the resolution before us is a resolution providing for the immediate consideration, adoption, and effect of an amendment to section 1.505, chapter 11 of the Code of the City of Grand Rapids and providing for the publication of the same. So commissioners, you'll see that this is an item that would allow for the city manager's approval for purchases to increase from 200,000 to 500,000 in case of emergency during this COVID-19 crisis. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Claren to provide additional information, and then we can ask any questions that we may have.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning, everyone, almost afternoon. With this item, we're simply increasing the authority for the city manager when it came to going out to find PPE, specifically N95 masks. We had one instance where we had to exceed the city manager's authority of 200,000 just to, this order was in large lots. We couldn't split it up to be underneath the city manager's authority. So just because of the necessity of providing, safety equipment to our personnel that are out there in the field, and what we're running into when we're going out for purchases, we recommend raising that authority up to 500,000. In the one instance where we did exceed this authority, it's on the bid list for your review, which we talked about at fiscal committee this morning.
Great, thank you. And Ms. Claren, or maybe city manager, I know we have talked about this internally, but maybe you can affirm that we are hopeful that we will receive, or at least have the ability to get reimbursed for some of these emergency purchases after this is over through some of the funds that have been allocated. Is that accurate?
Yes, we're through the work we're doing right now. We are tracking different grant opportunities and reimbursement with FEMA. So, once we get through this, allocate all the expenses, we'll be able to provide a report on where we are at and if there ends up being a differential between what we expended versus what we're able to be reimbursed for.
Great, thank you. Thanks. All right, Commissioners, any
Yeah, we need a motion. Sorry.
So moved. Support.
Thank you. Manager, did you want to add anything?
Mayor, I think over the past few weeks, we've, if you look at the total cumulative report on the fiscal report, it's over $400,000 of emergency purchases. And as Molly said, if I could have made a bigger order for supplies, I would have done it if they were available. So this gives us that flexibility, and we will do our due diligence to make sure it's vetted, as well as report back to you and publicly on whatever we do for ratification.
Great, thank you. All right, Commissioners, any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll have the city clerk.
Yeah, Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Repart,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody,
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi,
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes, it carries. All right, that brings us to the end of our items today. Commissioners, thank you for all of your work in helping us figure out the virtual meetings. Couple things tonight, we'll be back together. You'll be able to log in starting at 6:30. We'll start the meeting at 7. So I'm going to recess our committee of the whole. We'll come back together tonight. We do have 5 scheduled public hearings in addition to our 2 opportunities for public comment at the beginning and at the end of the meeting. I know staff have been working really hard to come up with a smooth process to help residents and those who want to weigh in on those items be able to do that. So tonight, again, I'm going to ask for everybody's patience and grace as we figure this out and do our best to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to be heard. So with that, we'll go ahead and end.
Mayor, it may be helpful if I could maybe helpful for the city clerk to just inform the public how they can participate tonight. So
Thank you, City Manager. Good idea.
Just to clarify, there are 4 public hearings tonight, so there'll be 6 different opportunities.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. So we'll have this WebEx open at 6:30 PM this evening. Residents do not need to be on WebEx to watch the meetings. We'll still be on channel 26. We'll be streaming on Facebook and streaming on YouTube. If they want to make a public comment, they will call in to 311 or 456-3000, 311 or 456-3000. They'll listen to the prompt. It'll say, if you want to speak to the city commission, press 1. So press 1, and then you'll hear 6 different prompts that'll be available. One for any comments on the agenda items, things that were recommended this morning. Then there'll be each public hearing. It'll give a description of each public hearing. And then finally, there'll be a final public comment on any other item that anybody wants to bring before the commission. The rules are still the same as any commission meeting. We're trying to make this as the same as any commission as possible. We will please refrain from profanity, calling of names, using derogatory slurs or anything like that. We will cut people off if they continue to do anything that is in that line. And then you'll be in a phone queue. It'll let you know what order you are in. So we're going to do first come, first serve. For example, if you are in Q1 to talk about agenda items, you'll say you're the first, you're the second, you're the third. And when the music stops, you'll hear 3 beeps, and someone will ask you to state your name and the city you live in, and then you'll have 3 minutes. So we're trying to treat this process exactly like lining up, to get in front of the microphone at City Commission. You're just going to be doing it through a phone line.
Great. City Clerk, just a clarification. I pulled up the agenda that is posted on the city's website for our meeting tonight, and there are 5 public hearings listed. So I don't know if something has changed, but the list I have in front of me, and that's what's on our city website under agenda packet, under the agenda packet, is the public hearing for the distance requirement to Dickinson Park, the public hearing on the historic preservation, CDBG action plan, the Brownfield plan amendment, and then the special assessment. So I have 5.
The special assessment should be going to the May meeting.
The special assessment for ornamental street lighting.
Let's connect offline, Joe. I have the same 5 public hearings.
Okay.
Well, I just think we're going to need to clarify if folks think that we have a public hearing tonight and it's been posted and they're calling in and we don't have that listed. So maybe we can get a clarification for that, and then you can send out an update to the city commission.
Mayor, let's just assume we are going with what's posted on the agenda for now, and then if there needs to be clarified, we'll change. But so the public's not confused, that's what we've posted.
Okay,
at this
great.
point.
Thank you. Thanks. All right, commissioners, any final thoughts before we end? Commissioner Lanier?
So can you speak to the agenda and how the agenda will be published for those who are watching like Facebook Live? So typically, when we're going live, we're just going live, and they would have to access the agenda from the website. Will we have images of the agenda maybe within the post on the Facebook Live so that people can see the agenda? And I also think it's important to have the rules that are typically on the agenda posted wherever the meetings are posted, so that if they're not listening to us now, people will be aware of what those rules are before they
Sure.
add public
We can have links that bring them to them. The issue is when we post it on here or whatever, it covers up with the person speaking, so then you get small tiles. So if we, how we're sharing at the earlier meetings, if that's the case, then we cover up a lot of the space inside the web.
I'm actually recommending publishing it wherever the meeting link is posted.
Oh yes, we'll have links.
Okay.
I'll work with those who work with the YouTube and the Facebook to have links put to how to get to the agenda.
Thank you so much.
Great idea, Commissioner. Thank you. Commissioner Jones, did you have a question or comment?
I did, Mayor. In light of the fact that we're all home and operating probably in a much more casual manner, I've committed every Commission Tuesday to represent a neighborhood or a small business within my second ward every Tuesday that we have City Commission. Today, I'm representing Creston. I just want to give a shout out to Creston. Not Creston High School, the Creston Neighborhood Association. Yes.
That's a woo-hoo too.
Commissioner, that's a great idea. We can all bring out our swag.